Hi, welcome back to another podcast for our skill of the week where we're talking about our social skills and dispositions that we're teaching students here at school. We want you as parents to know about them, and also we want to just talk about some ways that maybe you guys can try incorporating these into the home. So today I'm excited to be here with our administration. We have Mrs. Matucci and Mrs. Holmes. So they're going to be giving you guys some ideas of things that we do here at school to facilitate these skills, and then I'll talk about some things we can do at home. We're going to start with how to make friends.
Very important.
That is.
This is an important skill. I think a lot of times at school, our kids, especially if they're new to our school, this is an area where they really need some explicit instruction. They need to know what to do. And the biggest thing that I see at recess when I'm out there is kids kind of hanging back, and they'll say things to me like they don't want to play with me. And the first thing I'll say is, have you asked them to play? And they say, no. And then I walk them up to the friends and I teach them, hey, can I play with you? Now you need to say that, and we model that for kids. So, here at school, that really is one way that we try to teach kids explicitly how to make friends.
I like that, and I really think that if they can get those skills on how to go up and talk to people, that'll help them throughout their whole lives in finding a job and getting along with people in the workplace and at home and everywhere. So that's really a great skill to have.
And I think one more thing too I see is I want kids to look at kids who are playing, who are having fun, and pick the right group of friends for them. Oftentimes they get comfortable in the group of friends, and maybe it's not always the most healthy friendship, but they keep going to those friends. So making sure that the friends that they choose are kind to them, they share things that they maybe like, they have in common, they know how to problem solve. That's really going to help them have a healthy friendship here at school too.
Not every person is a good fit for another person,
Yeah, right.
And you may have personalities that clash with each other, and no one wants to be around somebody who doesn't make them feel good or makes them unhappy. So so we don't say here at school that you have to be friends with every person, but you do need to respect every person. Get along with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something to note, that we do teach kids to ask if somebody's not doing something that you like. They say, stop, can you please stop doing that? And if they don't, they have the right to walk away. And so we talk to kids about, hey, if you have a lot of friends walking away from you and they're telling you to stop, then that's the time to listen to that, to stop doing those things so that you can continue to have friends around you and you don't lose all those friends.
Right, I love all those things. So a couple of things that I also talk about students is we oftentimes want to be friends with the most popular kids or who looks the coolest. And those can be great friends, but what I instruct kids who are having a hard time making those friends is to start with those who smile and to just look around, like Mrs. Matucci said, and see who's actually willing to play with others. So that's something at home that you can really talk to your students about. Well, who looks like the nice kids at school? Who has a lot of people hanging around them because they're kind? So that's one of the very first ways. I also tell students that they also need to look like they are kind. So I tell them that I always give students a homework assignment of start smiling. You need to smile at the different students in your classroom so that way they know that you are someone that is a safe person to be a friend with too. Another thing that we have happen here that I think is a great thing that I do as a parent myself is asking questions when your students come to you and say, this person's been mean to me or I'm being bullied. It's really easy as parents, because we love our students, to be like, what is going on? To jump to that conclusion of, yes, you are. But what we see, we do have bullying at times because students are learning. But more often than not, it's what we call a friendship conflict, that there's a misunderstanding, or maybe someone was having a bad day and the students still want to be friends with each other. So that happens a lot. So I think just asking more questions about it, like, well, tell me what happened first. Then what happened? And not asking leading questions like, well, what did that student do to you? But say, okay, what happened first? Then what? Then what? Well, how did you respond? And I think a lot of times when I've done that at my house with my students, like my kids, I've learned that they've actually done something that wasn't super polite as well. And we were able to have a discussion at home about how, because they're learning, to learn about how they could handle that differently next time. So that's just something I've learned a lot and picked up as a parent watching somebody else with that. Another way to make friends is I have a lot of parents in this community talk about how they don't always feel safe sending their kids outside to play. And that can be a real struggle. And I think for a lot of us growing up, we were able to go outside and play, but society has changed a lot where that's not so common anymore. So it can be really tricky to make friends in a neighborhood where there's not a lot of students or people aren't going outside. So use the Kearns Rec Center. They have a lot of activities that are really cheap. They also have sliding scale fees and fee waivers, so you can talk to them. And they have so many different programs where kids can still be in fun activities that are age appropriate with students, and they can develop those social skills. And because it's all in the same community, it might be someone who might not be coming to school here, but they could still develop a relationship with. Absolutely. So that is one way that you can do a workaround around that.
I think, too, as a parent, it's really important that we know our kids' friends at home. We know, we meet them, we know where they're at, we supervise our kids. That really is important, especially as well with friendships at home.
I agree. One other thing, too, is joining the PTA here or working with our family support center. That's a way that you can become friends with adults who will then have children, too. So that can be just another way to make friends.
For parents.
Right. And as adults, seeing what our community of kids is like here, what our students are like. And you can see that we have some wonderful, amazing kids here.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the majority of our students, I'd say 99.9%, are just amazing and fun, and you would like your kids to be friends with them. Yeah. If you're here, you'll see that.
Yeah. And I think one thing, too, to remember as we talk to our students about making friends is it's important to let them know that our friends aren't like us, and that's okay. We do have students through the times here that have had disabilities, and I've always been so happy to see how kind our kids can be to our students here who have visible disabilities. But on the other hand, sometimes I've seen some real bullying happening when maybe the disability is not as visible, but the student acts differently. So kind of bringing up those kind of situations when we're out in the community where maybe we see some people who have some disabilities and pointing out, how could we be kind and polite to this student? Right. And that will also just create a really strong community.
Just that level of acceptance. And you don't want everybody and all your friends to be the same as you, because then you don't learn, or the creativity is just lessened. So,
but to teach that kindness of other people who are not like you is huge, because they're going to experience a lot of people who are not like them, and if they can get that experience and understanding of not everybody's just like me, and not everybody has to be just like me, and so I think that's a great lesson to learn to teach your children.
All right, so then after that, our next skill we're going to learn is active listening. So this is a word that we throw around a lot in education. So,
but parents, you probably know this as well. After we start talking about this, you're going to know it as just listening. This is just the same, right?
It is. It is. And what we really want our students to do is do more than just hear the words we're saying, right? Because I know as parents and adults at home, you have that where it's like, oh my gosh, you heard me, but you're not doing what I asked. Yeah. So, and we have the same experience at school. So how do we teach active listening at school?
Okay. At school, we use a term called fever. And fever starts with you facing the person, being able to make eye contact, and knowing that making eye contact doesn't mean conflict. It means that I'm paying attention to you, that I'm listening to you. And so facing the person, making eye contact, E is the eye contact. And then our voice level. You will want to watch if you are being really loud and you kind of notice people or friends stepping back from you, that's a time where you want to tone it down. Or when they're maybe coming in closer, or they can't, or they're asking you what, or repeat that, maybe using really quiet voices. We have a lot of shy kids, and that's okay. But teaching our kids that when they respond, we need to be able to hear them. And then also their expression, that if their face needs to match their expression, or their face and expression needs to match what they're talking about. And I often see this a lot too, unfortunately, with administration. I have kids that come in and maybe they have a conflict, they feel like they're in trouble, and they want to laugh. And I know it's not funny, and they don't think it's funny, because that is a natural reaction. It's a defense mechanism, and that's okay. But I have to teach them, hey, when you smile in a situation that's pretty serious, someone might not really think that you're being very serious, and then that can come off as disrespectful. And so I teach them that without disciplining or without having them in trouble. Just like, let's match our conversation. If this is a serious conversation, we want to have intent. If this is a fun one, yeah, let's smile. Let's show interest in what people are talking about. And then finally, just relax. Enjoy the conversation. Enjoy the company of people, listening and reciprocating that conversation back. But active listening really is essential in the classrooms because it shows that our kids are engaged in the lessons and they're learning the content that they need to be learning as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, to remember that active listening is more than just hearing the words. It's really like processing what's being said. And that's why it's so essential for school, but also home. One thing about active listening that we really also want to have students do is I make sure that I have their attention first. Mm-hmm. Because so often, and I know these who have taught in the classroom.
Distracted.
Yeah, like if you just say it to the whole class and someone's not paying attention. So if you have a student or a friend who just gets a little bit more distractible, I will go over and say, hey, I need you to look at my nose.
Go down on their level.
Go down on their level.
Yes.
And that will help a lot because then once you have their attention, then you know that active listening can happen.
And that can help at home too. Like you said, as a parent, we're so much bigger than our kids. So getting down on their level and being able to make that eye contact with them is really essential.
And then they know you're listening to them too. I mean, when they're talking, if you can come down to their level, then they don't feel like they're being overpowered, and they feel like that you're there and you're really on their side and on their level.
Maybe putting down our phones. I know that's really hard as parents and kids, but when we're so distracted with our phones and stuff, I think that can be a big part of not really listening to each other.
Right.
Another thing that we do here at school that works really well at home too is, I just forgot it. What was I going to say?
I threw you off.
No, you're good. So we're talking about, so what happens sometimes is that levels will start getting louder. And so then no one's active listening. So, and this happens at home too when there's a lot of chaos or a lot of stuff going on. So one of the teaching skills that I learned from another teacher who is fabulous is you start to lower your voice. As you do that, then everything else around will go down too. So if you find that things are kind of chaotic at home in a moment and no one is listening, then finding a way to make things more still before giving that instruction or the request to a student will really help that out a lot.
It's funny that as a teacher, you think, you have 30 kids in the class, you have to get their attention. But it's very interesting that when you start whispering, all of a sudden they all start looking around wondering who's whispering, and then they quiet right down and listen to you. So
and even I'll just stop talking sometimes and I'll just wait and I don't have to say anything, and that also can work a lot.
That was a really good one. There was something I was going to say, but I don't remember either. So we're okay. If it comes up, we'll share it. So
we're forgetting a lot today.
Yeah, it's okay. Listening really is important, in the classroom and at home, because that's the essential part of communication. Oh, I remember now. Communication-wise is oftentimes we'll ask kids to repeat what it is we're saying or repeat their understanding of something. So if you give your kids a direction, and especially if you find that you give them more than one direction and they're getting lost, that's okay. It doesn't mean that they instantly have attention deficit, or anything like that. It just means that sometimes our brains are just on overload. So giving one step at a time, making checklists so that you can talk to your kids so they're listening. Okay, this is what I need you to do first. What is it that I need you to do? Okay, I want you to go do that and then come back to me, and just being able to have them tell you what it is that you are trying to say to them. And you too, if your kids are telling what I hear you saying is, and you can just repeat it, because that helps us understand and make sure the message is the same also.
Yeah, I actually was listening to a podcast this morning on the way in about a guy talking about he went to dinner and his wife he looked over and his wife was talking to a stranger and just in tears. And she was in tears because this lady took the time to listen to her and her story, and that connected strangers. And so this active listening really can be it is the foundation for relationship building. So spouses, children, partners. But if you do find that there's maybe a relationship that's struggling a little bit, this is where we start, is with that active listening. And we ask teachers to do this too with students. This is where we start for relationships.
Yeah. Sure. It's good.
Sure.
Okay. Our last skill for this month that we're going to be talking about is called appropriate voices. And the reason we call it appropriate is because there will be times we need students to speak loudly. There will be times we need them to not be speaking at all. And then there's just a wide variety there too. So I'm going to let these guys talk about our voice level system here at school and anything else that goes along with that.
You can kind of introduce it.
Well, we have a voice level system of 0 to 4. And there are times when students should have no voice, no noise coming out of them. We even say in the hallway when you're walking, we shouldn't really hear feet being loud and that kind of thing, but voices should be completely off, 0. So when we ask for a level 0, that means voices are completely off. Just lost our power.
Cool. I'm sure it'll be back on, but
we'll keep going.
We're good.
Good. Yeah, you want to go to 1 or 2?
Yeah, and I think the thing with 0 is that they need to understand that there's a reason for each of these. When we talk about 0 and 1 voice level, it really is because it might be a situation where other people are going to be interrupted by by the voices. Their learning might be interrupted by that. We don't want all of our teachers to always have to teach with their door closed. They want the airflow, they want the openness, and so having quiet halls allows for our classrooms to not be disrupted. And so that really is important. The next levels kind of go together a little bit. We say a level 1 or 2. Level 1 or 2 is kind of what we've got going on here, is where within the proximity of 1 or 2 people should be hearing you. Maybe a level 1 is your whisper voice. It's much quieter. Level 2 is your group work in class, where you're partnering with friends and or with partners and work and such, and so talking a little bit louder so they hear you, but not everybody else, as level 1 and 2.
Right. And a level 3 would be if you were speaking in front of a group. When a student needs to get up and speak to their entire class or answer a question so the entire class could hear them, they would want to speak with a voice that would project that everyone in the room could hear them. The teacher speaks with a level 3 many times just so that all students can hear. It's not really a yell, but it's a loud voice so that everyone can hear.
Not clear. And I think a level 3 is also a good outside voice. A level 4 definitely should never be in school. Those are our screaming voices. And we really discourage kids using them outside too, because other people don't like to hear screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
So it's typically not... 4 is typically not going to be used much, maybe across the soccer field if you want the buddy to hear you, hey, pass it to me, I'm open, or something like that. But typically we have even a level 3 outside for recess, and a level 4 would be that max voice. And so that's here at school what we do.
And I think at home, it's also really important to have appropriate voices. Even though home is a place where, there's some less structure, we still have the rules to be able to create an environment that's pleasing and set it to everybody. If it's always super loud at home, that increases our stress hormone in our brain, which is called cortisol, and then that's where we might be able to. That's where we might see some of our students having some more stress levels. So it is important, even when we're not in a structured environment, to have times of quiet and peace. I know that I talk a lot with parents sometimes when they're saying our kids are having a hard time going to bed. This is a great time to practice some more quiet time in the home. A lot of studies show that if you're on small screens such as tablets or phones, that your brain needs an hour before you go to bed to be able to go to bed. Your brain has to, it takes that much time to shut down. So one thing I talk to parents about is incorporating quiet time, right? Like an hour before bed. We turn off our electronics, and then that's a good time where you can look at books, do some painting, go for a walk as a family, reading. All of these things are going to help that brain and all that cortisol decrease, so that way you're more likely to have success in going to bed. So just that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Like again, as a parent, I had to have that quiet time for my own sanity, and so it became a part of our daily schedule of I need some I love you guys so much, but I need some time to myself and I need it to be quiet. So we all had a half hour where it's like we're all going to our own separate little space to have time to ourselves, and that was really helpful for us to be able to have a happier home.
I think I remember too with that being okay with being quiet, because when you turn off the TV and you turn off the voices, then you're going to get that listening and that opportunity to communicate with your kids too. So maybe just a certain time where it's no electronics, including just TV background noise. A lot of people go home and instantly the TV comes on and that background noise has to be there, but maybe even just being willing for a certain amount of time to shut that down so that you can hear each other. I think that's a really essential thing. And one other thing that popped up in my head too was teaching your kids appropriate voice levels is going to help them in social situations such as restaurants and stores. You know, we all have seen, and we've all had kids, not just seen, but had kids who, you know, you go into a restaurant and they have a hard time. And it's one thing if they're upset, but teaching our kids an appropriate voice level for even a restaurant and how we respect everybody else in the restaurant, what's appropriate. Everybody doesn't need to listen to our conversations. We've all been at tables where we know exactly what's going on with that entire family too. So just monitoring our own voice level so that our kids can know that this is a pleasant time, that we're not yelling and running around and such in places like that too.
Yeah. All right, so those are the skills we're going to be teaching in the month of September. So we're super excited about that. If you guys have any feedback, you can feel free to reach out to me, Miss Amber at David Gorley. But we're just really excited to have this become a community effort to build these skills into our kids' lives. Thanks so much, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.